Hello, my friend. The world of magic, filled with legends and ancient tales, is opening its gates once again. Tonight, in the Gryffindor dormitory by the crackling fireplace, I will share another story with my friends. Join us, for the magic is about to come alive.
The war was over. The castle still smoked, and the air carried the scent of ash and healing potions. Dawn broke over Hogwarts like a sigh after a long cry, washing the ruined battlements in gold. Hermione Granger stood among the stones, her wand still trembling in her hand. Around her the survivors moved slowly, speaking in hushed tones, as if the castle itself might shatter if they spoke too loudly. Voldemort was gone, truly gone. His last cry had faded into the night, his body lifeless on the ground beside the great hall. The nightmare had ended, and yet, as Hermione gazed across the courtyard, she felt no peace, only silence and the strange, hollow ache that comes when a purpose has vanished. She helped where she could. In the days that followed, Hermione worked beside the healers, mending wounds and repairing shattered spells. She comforted the younger students who had seen too much. When Kingsley Shacklebolt was named interim minister, she helped him restore order. Yet something within her stirred restlessly. The rebuilding of the ministry, the sorting of records, even the quiet evenings with Ron and Harry at the Burrow. It all felt like trying to fit back into a world that had already changed beyond repair. One evening she sat by the fire in the Burrow's sitting room. The chatter of the Weasley family surrounded her. George trying to smile again, Molly knitting to keep her hands busy, Ron laughing too loudly as if forcing cheer into the room. Hermione smiled faintly, but her eyes were distant. Harry noticed. "You're not here, are you?" he asked softly. She looked at him. "I'm not sure we're here anymore," she confessed. "We fought for so long, and now that it's over, I can't seem to find what comes next." Harry nodded. "I know," he said. "But maybe peace takes getting used to." Peace. The word tasted strange. That night Hermione lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her mind, ever restless, turned to questions she had no answers for. There were still whispers, rumors of Death Eaters who had fled, relics of dark magic that had not been destroyed. It was said that some had gone beyond Britain, into lands few wizards had ever visited. Weeks passed, and the Ministry's new Auror department began to track these fugitives. Hermione, unable to sit idle, joined them, not as an Auror, but as a researcher and spell advisor. Her intelligence was unmatched. Even hardened Aurors respected her insight. It wasn't long before her name began to circulate among those planning field missions. Then came the letter. It arrived by owl on a gray morning, sealed with the sigil of the Ministry. Kingsley himself had written it. He commended her service, but the tone of his message was grave. "Our agents report an unusual gathering in the far north beyond the bounds of known wizarding presence. We suspect surviving Death Eaters. Magical traces detected there are unlike any we've seen, cold, ancient, and powerful. I am authorizing a small investigative mission. Your knowledge of dark enchantments would be invaluable." Hermione read the letter twice, her heart beating faster. The far north? There were no wizarding settlements there. Beyond Scotland lay only sea, then strange foreign lands, places that existed in wizarding maps only as fog and speculation. She thought of Ron, of Harry, of the life they were trying to rebuild. And yet, something in her stirred. an echo of the courage that had driven her through the war. That evening she met Harry in Diagon Alley. The winter air was crisp, and snow dusted the cobblestones. "You're thinking of going," he said as soon as she told him. "I have to," she replied simply. "If something dark remains, we can't ignore it." Ron frowned. "Hermione, it's done. You've done enough. Let the Aurors handle it." She smiled sadly. "You both know that's not who I am." A few days later, she stood before a ministry airship at the northern coast, wand holstered, travel cloak drawn tight against the wind. Beside her stood two companions. Neville Longbottom, now a promising herbologist but still as brave as ever, and a tall, pale man she'd never met before. "Sir Alaric Morn," he introduced himself, bowing slightly. His accent was foreign, northern, clipped, and cold. His eyes were a strange gray, like a storm over the sea. Auror, newly transferred from the Department of International Magical Cooperation. Hermione studied him. "Sir Alaric? That's an unusual title." "A habit from home," he said with a faint smile. "We Northerners still cling to old words." The airship's engines hummed softly, ready for flight. The mission was small, 3 wizards and a pilot, but its purpose was weighty. Hermione looked once more at the sea, stretching endlessly northward, dark and glimmering beneath the winter sun. Neville caught her gaze. "You think we'll find them?" Hermione hesitated. "I think we'll find something." The airship lifted, cutting through the mist. Below them, the coastline fell away, and the cold deepened. They flew for hours over endless gray waters until, at last, the clouds broke, and there, far ahead, loomed a land none of them had ever seen before. A vast continent of snow-crowned mountains and dark forests stretched beneath them. The pilot glanced back nervously. "That's not on any wizarding chart," he muttered. Hermione leaned forward, eyes wide. "Then we're the first." The wind howled through the ship's hull as they descended toward the unknown land. Hermione felt her wand pulse faintly in her hand, as if sensing a power older and colder than anything she'd known. They touched down in a clearing of frozen trees. The air was sharp as glass. Hermione stepped out first, her boots crunching on the frost. Above them, crows circled, their cries echoing across the silence. Neville shivered. "Where are we?" Alaric looked toward the distant hills, his expression unreadable. "This is Westeros," he said quietly. "And if the old tales are true, this is where the cold gods sleep." Hermione's heart quickened. She had crossed a sea and a boundary no witch had crossed before. Whatever lay ahead, she knew the world had just become far larger and far darker than she had ever imagined. The wind that swept across the northern forest carried a voice, a whispering chill that crept beneath cloaks and through bone. Hermione pulled her hood closer as snow began to fall, soft and soundless. The trees rose tall and ancient, their branches draped with frost like white cobwebs. Somewhere far away, a wolf howled. Their small camp was quiet. The ministry airship had returned to Britain, leaving the 3 of them alone. A charm kept their fire alive against the cold, though even magic seemed to burn dimmer in that place. Neville poked at the flames, his breath misting in the air. "I've never felt magic like this," he murmured. "It's everywhere, like the ground itself is alive." Hermione nodded, crouching to trace a sigil into the snow. "Old magic," she said, "pre-wand, maybe even pre-human." She shivered, not from cold, but from awe. "There's power here that doesn't belong to us." Alaric sat slightly apart, his back to a tree, sharpening a short sword that looked more at home in a knight's armory than a wizard's trunk. Hermione watched him from the corner of her eye. His magic, when he cast even the simplest charm, shimmered differently, rougher, wilder, and older. "Where exactly are we, Alaric?" she asked at last. He looked up, his gray eyes steady. "The north, the wild lands beyond the wall. Men here tell tales of white shadows that walk in winter and kings that never die. I thought them stories once." His blade caught the firelight. "Now I'm not so sure." They fell into uneasy silence. That night Hermione dreamed of the war again, Hogwarts burning, friends crying out, a shadowed figure whispering her name. But this time when she turned, it wasn't Voldemort she saw. It was something older, faceless, wrapped in frost and fog. Its voice was the wind itself. "You should not have come here." She woke with a gasp. The fire had burned low. Snow drifted into the camp, and Alaric stood at the edge of the clearing, his wand raised. "What is it?" Hermione whispered. "Tracks," he said, "not human." Neville hurried over. "Wolves?" Alaric shook his head. "Too large." They followed the prince at dawn, moving north through the forest. The tracks led to a ruin half buried in ice, a ring of stones carved with strange runes that pulsed faintly blue beneath the snow. Hermione knelt, brushing frost away from one of the carvings. "This writing isn't runic," she breathed. "It's older. It's something else." Alaric's voice was low. "The first men called this place the Circle of Cold Hands. They said it was where the dead were given to the ice." Neville paled. "Given?" Before Alaric could answer, the snow stirred. A soft sound like the crack of thin ice echoed across the stones. Hermione drew her wand. "Lumos," she whispered. The light cast long shadows over the ruin. Then the ground moved. A hand, blue-white and stiff as stone, clawed its way from beneath the snow. Another followed. The air grew colder still, and Hermione's breath froze before her lips. "Back!" Alaric shouted, stepping forward. "They're whites!" The corpses rose, 3 of them clad in tattered furs, eyes glowing like shards of frozen light. Hermione's heart pounded, but she reacted before fear could claim her. "Incendio!" she cried. Fire burst from her wand, engulfing one of the creatures. It screamed, an awful, hollow sound, and fell into ash. But the others pressed forward. Neville swung his wand like a whip. "Diffindo." The spell cut through the air, severing a white's arm. But it didn't stop. It lunged at him. An Alaric's sword flashed. Steel met ice with a sharp ring, and the white fell, lifeless once more. When the last of them burned, the silence returned, heavy and strange. Hermione stood trembling, her breath ragged. "What were those things?" she whispered. "Servants of the cold gods," Alaric said grimly. "We call them the others. Men here say they vanished thousands of years ago." His eyes flicked toward her. "But if they rise again, something stirs them." Hermione looked back at the ring of stones. The runes had gone dark, but she could still feel the magic humming deep below. Something had awakened. That evening they made camp near the edge of a frozen lake. Alaric kept watch while Neville brewed a warming draft. Hermione sat apart, her quill scratching across parchment as she recorded the day's events. Her logical mind tried to categorize what she'd seen. Necromancy, perhaps, or an unknown form of magical reanimation, but no theory fit. The air shifted suddenly and she froze. A faint shimmer, like the ripple of a spell, passed across the lake's surface. She rose, wand ready. "Do you feel that?" Alaric turned, eyes narrowing. "Magic," From the ice came a low hum, soft at first, then rising into a chorus of whispers. Words in no language Hermione knew. The surface cracked, and pale light glowed beneath. "Get back!" she shouted. The ice split open with a thunderous crack, and water exploded upward, freezing midair into shards. In the heart of the lake, something vast moved, a shape of shadow and frost. Two eyes opened beneath the surface, blue as winter stars. Hermione's wand shook in her hand. The whispers filled her mind, now clear and terrible. The serpent of warmth comes to the land of cold. The balance is broken. Then the vision vanished. The ice stilled. The light faded. Only her echoing breath remained. Neville hurried to her side. "Hermione, what did you see?" She swallowed hard. A warning. Alaric looked toward the horizon where the snowfields stretched endlessly north. "Then the old stories were true," he said quietly. "The long night comes again." Hermione met his gaze. "Not if we stop it?" He gave a wry smile. "Then you'll need more than spells, my lady witch." "And you'll need more than steel," she replied. For a moment, despite the cold, they both smiled. The bond between them, two warriors of different worlds, was sealed by that shared defiance. Beyond the trees, the wind rose again, carrying with it faint echoes of something ancient and patient, stirring from its slumber. And as the first true storm of winter began to fall, Hermione Granger felt the weight of destiny settle upon her shoulders once more. She thought she had left war behind. She was wrong. The storm raged for 2 days without pause. Snow fell so thickly that the world beyond a few paces became a blur of white. Hermione and her companions took shelter in the ruins of an abandoned watchtower, half buried in ice and stone. Wind shrieked through its cracks, and every creak of wood sounded like a cry. Neville huddled near the fire, muttering about the greenhouses of Hogwarts. "At least the plants there didn't try to freeze me alive," he said, his tone light but his eyes uneasy. Hermione managed a tired smile. "You always said you wanted to study magical flora abroad. Consider this your first northern field trip." Alaric stood at a narrow window slit, watching the storm with arms crossed. "This is no common blizzard," he said. "The wind sings in patterns. It's spell-wrought." Hermione moved beside him, her wand drawn. The air beyond shimmered faintly like veils of unseen threads dancing through the snow. She recognized that rhythm, the hum of woven magic, but not any she'd learned at Hogwarts. It was older, colder, deliberate. "Someone's calling the storm," she whispered. Alaric nodded. "A sorcerer of the frost, if such still exist." As the day waned into blue twilight, the storm began to quiet. Outside, the snow lay deep and undisturbed, stretching to the horizon. Hermione stepped beyond the tower's broken door, testing the air, still silent. Then faintly she saw something in the distance, a light, pale and flickering. "Do you see that?" she asked. Neville squinted. "A campfire?" "No," Alaric said. "A beacon." They trudged toward it, wands ready, feet sinking into snow. The light grew brighter as they approached until they reached a clearing ringed with ice-crusted stones. In its center stood a figure cloaked in gray, holding a staff crowned with frost. The light pulsed from the staff's tip, slow as a heartbeat. "Who goes there?" Alaric called, his sword half drawn. The figure turned and Hermione gasped. The face beneath the hood was that of a woman. Pale, ageless, her eyes shining faintly blue. Her voice was calm and deep, carrying across the clearing without effort. "You should not be here," she said. The dead walk these woods. Hermione stepped forward. We're seeking those who woke them. The woman regarded her for a long moment. Then you seek death itself? The cold ones stir because something from beyond the sea has broken their sleep. You brought it here. Hermione's blood chilled. What do you mean? The woman raised her staff, pointing it toward Hermione's wand. The magic of your world is fire and words. It burns, it binds, it changes. But the magic of this land is ice and silence. When fire comes north, ice answers. Hermione lowered her wand slowly. If our presence has caused this, we'll make it right. Tell us how. The woman's expression softened just slightly. There is a place far beyond the wall of men. Beneath a mountain shaped like a crown lies the source of the frost's will. The one who sleeps there commands the dead. If he wakes fully, no warmth will remain. Neville swallowed hard. How do we stop him? The woman looked toward the north, where the clouds glowed faintly blue. You cannot, but you might delay him. Her gaze fell on Alaric. You, child of the cold, will know the path. She, her eyes turned to Hermione, carries a fire not born of this world. It may be enough. Before Hermione could ask more, the woman lowered her staff. The light vanished, and she was gone. The snow fell again, soft and slow, erasing her footprints. They returned to the tower in silence. Alaric's jaw was tight, his thoughts hidden. At last, as they settled beside the fire, Hermione spoke. You knew of this mountain, she said. He nodded. The crowned peak. My ancestors spoke of it in tales meant to frighten children. But the story said the ice god who sleeps there was slain long ago. Hermione's mind raced. If Voldemort's remnants of magic crossed into this world, if some fragment of his curse clung to an object or spell, it could have merged with this ice god. Two darknesses feeding one another. Neville shivered. So we're hunting something that's part Voldemort and part whatever ancient thing lives under that mountain. Yes, Hermione said softly, and we have to reach it before it wakes. At dawn, they began their march north. The forest thinned into bleak tundra. The sun, when it appeared at all, was pale and distant. Once, they passed a circle of stones covered in frost-bitten runes. Alaric paused to touch one and drew back sharply. What is it? Hermione asked. He stared at his hand. The stones, remember. They pressed on. At night, the aurora danced above them, ribbons of green and blue that seemed to watch like eyes. The land was empty, yet Hermione often felt they were being followed. She would turn, and there, always at the edge of vision, stood a figure in black furs, watching. When she blinked, it was gone. On the 5th day, they reached the wall. It rose before them like the spine of the world, an enormous barrier of ice, glittering faintly in the weak sunlight. Neville gaped. How can anything be that big? It was built by magic, Alaric said. The men who guard it, if they still live, are called the Night's Watch. But when they found the nearest gate, it was abandoned. The fortress beside it lay silent, its fires long dead. Snow drifted through shattered doors, and frozen armor hung from the walls. Inside, they found signs of struggle, marks of swords, scorchings from spells. Hermione knelt by a shattered wand lying half buried in ice. She lifted it carefully. This wand is British, she murmured. Someone from our world was here. Alaric frowned. Then others crossed before us. As they searched the keep, Neville called from the far hall, Over here. They followed his voice into the great hall, where a map was carved into the stone table. Across its surface, lines of frost formed patterns like veins, spreading outward from one place in the far north. The same mountain symbol appeared there, the crowned peak, and beside it, carved roughly into the ice, were words in English. "We failed. The Dark Lord lives in the cold." Hermione's heart froze. Her breath left her lungs. "Someone came before us," she whispered, "and they found him." Alaric's face was grave. "Then our time is shorter than we thought." As night fell, they fortified the hall with protective charms. Hermione lay awake, staring at the ceiling of carved ice. The face of the pale woman haunted her mind. The words echoed, "The balance is broken." Outside, the wind rose again. A figure moved along the outer walls, tall, slender, its eyes glowing faintly blue. It watched the sleeping travelers in silence, then turned northward, disappearing into the storm, and far away beneath the mountain shaped like a crown. A great heartbeat pulsed once in the ice, then again, and again. Something ancient was waking. Dawn came bleak and colorless over the frozen fortress. Pale light crept through the shattered windows, touching the frost like fire on glass. Hermione rose before the others, wrapping her cloak tightly and stepping into the still air. The world beyond the wall stretched before her, an endless white wilderness, vast and unmoving, broken only by the distant shimmer of peaks. The carvings on the stone table haunted her thoughts. "We failed. The Dark Lord lives in the cold." Who had written it? How had they crossed to this world before her? The handwriting had been rough, hurried, a survivor's message left for whoever might follow. She traced the grooves with her fingers, feeling the chill seep through her gloves. Behind her, Neville stirred, his voice sleepy but wary. "You're up early again. Any dreams?" She shook her head. "Only thoughts I can't quiet." He joined her by the window. "I keep thinking of Hogwarts," he murmured. "The warmth of the greenhouses, the laughter after classes. Feels like another lifetime." "It was," Hermione said softly, "but every lifetime leaves a mark." Alaric approached from the doorway, armor newly buckled, sword sheathed across his back. "If we mean to reach the crown peak before the next storm, we must move today." His tone left no room for argument. They packed quickly. As they crossed through the ruined courtyard, Neville spotted something buried beneath a drift of snow. A broken wand, blackened as if by fire. When he lifted it, frost melted along its surface, revealing a faint carving. AMSR. Hermione's jaw tightened. A Death Eater, one of the last to flee after the battle, so it's true they escaped through the north. Alaric's eyes darkened. "Then your Dark Lord's servants found this land first." They set out into the blinding waste. The snow reached their knees, and the cold gnawed through every spell of warmth they conjured. Hermione had thought she knew winter from the Scottish Highlands, but this was something else entirely. A living thing, cruel and watchful. Hours turned to days. The sun barely rose, lingering as a pale disk before vanishing again. They crossed frozen rivers and forests of crystal where every branch sparkled like glass. More than once they passed remnants of ancient walls, built from stone and ice, carved with the same strange symbols they had seen at the Circle of Cold Hands. Each night they camped in silence, fire warded against unseen eyes. Once in the deep of night, Hermione awoke to faint music, haunting, sorrowful, drifting on the wind. She followed the sound beyond the camp until she saw far across the snow, a woman standing on a hill. Her hair shimmered white as moonlight, her face veiled in mist. When Hermione blinked, the figure was gone and the music ceased. By the 5th day, they reached the foothills of the northern mountains. The wind here never stopped. It howled like a voice in the morning. The path rose sharply, leading through narrow passes flanked by cliffs of ice. Somewhere above, unseen ravens cried. They found the first sign of habitation when they least expected it, a village buried beneath frost, its wooden roofs caved in, doors hanging loose. Skeletons lay frozen in the streets, their faces locked in expressions of terror. Neville turned away. What happened here? Alaric knelt beside one of the corpses. The body was ancient, yet preserved perfectly by the cold. Around its neck hung a pendant of carved bone shaped like a 7-pointed star. "Children of the faith," he said quietly. "An old religion of the South. But what were they doing this far north?" Hermione examined the pendant. "Or who brought them here?" she murmured. "These people didn't belong to this place. They were drawn by something." In the largest hut, they discovered a small altar carved from ice. Upon it rested a sphere of black crystal, pulsing faintly with light. Hermione felt it before she touched it. The same dark resonance she had felt the night Voldemort fell when his curse tore itself apart. Neville stepped back. "That thing feels wrong." "It's a Horcrux remnant," she said softly, "a fragment of his soul. But how did it cross worlds?" Alaric's expression hardened. "It didn't cross alone. The veil between realms grows thin where death lingers. Perhaps your magic tore it open when your war ended." Hermione's stomach turned. "Then we're not just fighting a curse. We're fighting what's left of him, merged with the ice god this land once feared." Before she could speak again, the sphere flared, flooding the hut with blue-white light. Frost leapt from the walls, coating their cloaks, their hair, their breath. A voice echoed through the room, cold, hissing, unmistakable. "I live in the silence between worlds. You brought me here, Granger." Hermione's wand was already in her hand. "Show yourself." Laughter answered her, a hollow sound like cracking glass. The crystal pulsed once more, then shattered. Shards flew outward, and from the fragments rose a cloud of icy mist, swirling and coalescing into a human shape. The face that formed was pale and sharp, its eyes glowing faint blue. It was not Voldemort, not exactly, but something that remembered him. Neville raised his wand. "Reducto." The blast struck the figure, scattering it into vapor, but it reformed instantly. Alaric swung his sword through the mist, its edge ringing as if against stone. "Run!" he shouted. They fled into the storm, snow blinding their path. Behind them, the village began to crumble, frost spreading from the shattered hut like wildfire. Hermione's lungs burned as she stumbled through the drifts, but she felt the presence following, whispering her name always just behind her. They reached a narrow gorge and scrambled across an old rope bridge, swaying over a chasm. Alaric turned at the far side and slashed the ropes with his blade. The bridge snapped and fell, vanishing into darkness below. The wind howled in triumph or fury. It was impossible to tell. They collapsed against the rocks, gasping. Neville looked back toward the village. The glow was gone, but faint tendrils of mist still drifted upward into the night. "That wasn't just a ghost," he said hoarsely. "No," Hermione whispered. "That was what remains of him." Alaric's gaze was grim. "And it knows your name." They climbed higher into the mountains, seeking shelter in a cave lit by faint blue crystals. As they warmed themselves with shaking hands, Hermione studied the runes etched into the stone. They told of a battle long ago, men and magic and ice locked in war. The last line read, "The fire must never fade or the world will sleep forever." She closed her eyes, feeling the weight of those words. Fire and ice. Two worlds colliding because of her, because of the magic that refused to die. Outside, snow fell in endless silence. Somewhere far above, a sound like thunder rolled through the peaks. Though no storm brewed, Hermione looked toward the cave mouth and saw, just for a heartbeat, a flash of blue light on the horizon. The mountain was waking, and deep in her chest, her wand trembled, not in fear, but in answer. The night deepened over the mountains like a heavy cloak. Snow whispered across the cliffs, and the stars hung above in a silence so vast that Hermione could almost believe time itself had stopped. The cave glimmered faintly with the blue glow of the crystal veins that wound through the rock like frozen lightning. Hermione sat near the fire, her wand lying across her knees. She'd conjured warmth charms until her magic ached, yet the cold persisted, patient and unyielding. Across from her, Alaric leaned against the wall, eyes half closed, his breath slow. Neville slept beside the fire, his hand resting lightly on his wand even in dreams. Hermione stared into the flames. Every flicker seemed to echo with memory. The red light of curses, the screams in the great hall, the moment the elder wand fell silent in Harry's hand. It was over, she reminded herself. Voldemort was gone, and yet his shadow had found its way across worlds. She spoke softly, almost to herself. We destroyed every Horcrux, every fragment. How can any part of him still exist? Alaric's eyes opened. Your Dark Lord was more than a man. His will cut through the veil of death. When such a soul shatters, the pieces fall where they may. Some into your world, some perhaps into mine. Hermione frowned. Then this wasn't just accident. His curse found something here, something it could cling to. The Ice God, Alaric said, the one who sleeps beneath the crowned peak. She nodded slowly. If the two magics merged, the hatred of Voldemort and the power of that god, they could create something neither world could endure. Alaric regarded her for a long moment. Then we have no choice but to reach the mountain and end it before it wakes. Hermione met his gaze. We'll end it together. They broke camp at dawn. The wind was sharper now, as though the mountain itself breathed. The trail wound upward through passes of glittering ice and narrow ledges where one misstep meant a fall into endless fog. Hermione led with wand alight, casting warming wards that flickered weakly against the cold. By midday, the storm began again. Snow tore through the air in wild spirals, stinging their faces and blinding their sight. They pressed on until the wind forced them into a narrow ravine for shelter. There, they found remnants of stone statues half buried in frost, figures of armored men and women, their features eroded but their poses noble and fierce. Alaric brushed the ice from one inscription and read aloud, his voice carried by the wind. To those who stood when the light failed, to the fire that would not die. Neville looked uneasy. You think they fought the same thing we're fighting now? Hermione ran her hand across the stone. If legends last this long, it's because something wants us to remember. That night, as they huddled against the cold, Hermione dreamed. She stood upon a plain of silver snow beneath a sky filled with green fire. Before her rose a throne carved from ice, and upon it sat a figure cloaked in shadow. Why do you fight the inevitable? the voice asked, low, echoing, and cruelly familiar. She raised her wand. Because life is more than power. The shadow leaned forward, its eyes gleamed blue. Life is nothing but warmth waiting to die. Fire always burns out, Granger, but ice endures. The throne shattered, and she awoke with a cry. The cave was filled with the roar of wind. Alaric was already standing, sword drawn, his breath steaming in the chill. "They're here," he said. Shapes moved in the mouth of the ravine, figures cloaked in black frost, their eyes burning pale. The whites had come again, more than before, moving with dreadful silence. Hermione's pulse quickened. "Stay behind me," Alaric shouted. She ignored him, stepping forward and lifting her wand. Protego Maxima. A dome of light flared around them as the first wave struck. The barrier shuddered under the impact of clawed hands. Frost spread across its surface like cracks in glass. Neville stood beside her wand, trembling. "Incendio totalis!" Fire burst from the ground, sweeping through the first ranks of the dead. They fell, burning silently, but the others came on. "Too many," Neville gasped. Alaric slashed through the opening, his blade blazing with enchantment. "Fall back!" The three retreated deeper into the ravine, but the way behind had vanished beneath a sudden drift of snow. Trapped. Hermione felt the barrier weaken with every blow. Her magic faltered. Exhaustion gnawed at her. Then she remembered the crystal veins that pulsed through the mountain. She thrust her wand into the ice, murmuring an incantation under her breath, a transfiguration charm twisted with fire essence. The ice flared red, heat coursing through the walls. The nearest whites froze mid-stride as cracks of molten light split the stone. With a deafening roar, the ravine walls collapsed. The avalanche swallowed the dead, burying them beneath tons of burning ice. When silence fell again, only the hiss of steam remained. Hermione sank to her knees, shaking. Neville stared at her, eyes wide. "That was incredible," she managed a faint smile. "Improvised." Alaric's voice was rough with admiration. "You wield fire like a weapon of the gods." "I only borrowed what was already here," she replied quietly. "Fire and ice are part of the same world. They're meant to balance each other." They rested in the hollow left by the collapse. The walls glowed faintly from the heat, trapped within the stone. Outside, the storm passed, leaving the air eerily still. As they prepared to move again, Alaric spoke softly. "There's something I haven't told you." Hermione turned. "What is it?" He hesitated, then drew from his cloak a small amulet, a shard of clear ice encased in silver. "This belonged to my family. We were sworn once to the Northern Kings, the guardians of the Frostlands. Our oath was to watch the crowned peak and ensure the sleeper never woke. But my bloodline failed. The last guardians fell generations ago." Hermione regarded the amulet. Inside the ice, faint light pulsed like a heartbeat. "Then you were meant to face this, or die trying," he said grimly. "The old tales say only fireborn of another world could seal the mountain forever." He looked at her then, his gaze unflinching. "That means you." She said nothing for a long time. The weight of destiny pressed heavy on her chest. At last she whispered, "Then I won't fail them." The path ahead climbed ever upward. The peaks loomed close now, vast towers of stone and snow, their crowns hidden in mist. Each step grew harder, the air thin and bitter. By evening they reached a ledge overlooking a frozen valley. Below lay what remained of an ancient city, its towers shattered, its streets filled with ice. In the center, half buried in snow, stood a temple shaped like a star. "The gate to the mountain," Alaric said. "Beyond that lies the heart of the frost." Hermione stared down at the ruin, her breath misting in the air. "Then that's where we end this." As night fell, she felt the faintest tremor beneath her feet, the steady pulse of something alive, vast and waiting. And in the whispering wind, she thought she heard a voice again. "Come, Hermione Granger. The fire cannot hide forever." She tightened her grip on her wand and stepped into the darkness. The frozen valley spread before them like the bones of a fallen god. Towers that had once scraped the heavens now jutted from the snow as blackened spires. The remnants of streets wound between them, glittering with ice that reflected the dull blue of the clouds above. No sound broke the silence, no birds, no wind, only the soft creak of the snow beneath their boots. Hermione, Alaric, and Neville descended the slope cautiously. The ruin felt wrong. Each breath carried a weight, a whisper that wasn't quite sound. Hermione could sense it, the pulse of ancient magic humming in the stones, steady as a heartbeat. The temple at the city's heart called to her, faint and terrible. Neville glanced around uneasily. "How old do you think this place is?" Alaric's voice was low. "Older than men, older than dragons." This was the seat of the Frostborn, the servants of the Ice God. It is said they built this city to guard his tomb, but pride corrupted them, and the cold claimed their souls. Hermione shivered. "Then we're walking through the graves of those who once thought themselves immortal." They pressed on. Between the ruins, they found relics half buried in the snow, broken swords, fragments of armor etched with runes, wands made of strange, pale wood. Each fragment whispered faintly with lingering enchantments. The air grew colder still, and a strange light began to shimmer above the temple. By dusk, they reached the outer steps. The structure rose immense before them, its stone carved in the likeness of 7 crowns intertwined, each point crowned with frost. 2 vast doors of black ice stood sealed. Across their surface, runes burned faintly blue. Alaric approached, his breath clouding the air. "These marks are wards, old ones. They were meant to keep something in, not out." Hermione lifted her wand, tracing the runes. "They respond to warmth," she said softly. "Fire weakens them, but I think breaking them might also wake what they hold." Neville exhaled sharply. "So we're trapped either way." Alaric looked to Hermione. "Then it must be done quickly. If the sleeper is half awake already, we have little time." She nodded, took a steadying breath, and raised her wand. Incendio totalis. Flames burst against the ice, roaring bright and fierce. The blue light of the runes flickered, dimmed, and finally shattered like glass. The sound that followed was not a crack, but a sigh, vast, ancient, as if the mountain itself exhaled. The doors groaned open, revealing darkness within. They entered cautiously. The temple's interior was a vast hall carved from the mountain itself. Pillars of ice rose like frozen giants, their faces hidden in shadow. Strange blue fire burned in braziers along the walls, casting trembling light upon murals that covered the stone. Hermione studied one. It showed a figure of flame, locked in battle with a shadow of frost. Between them, the world lay split, one half alive with green, the other buried in snow. Beneath the scene, words in a language she didn't know glimmered faintly. Alaric translated in a whisper. "The fire came from beyond the sea. It burned the gods and gave men their hearts. But the cold remembers." Neville rubbed his arms. I don't like this. They moved deeper into the temple, following the sound of a slow, rhythmic pulse. It grew stronger with every step, echoing through the stone like a drumbeat. At last they came to a circular chamber at the heart of the mountain. In its center stood a great block of clear ice, taller than a house, and within it lay a figure, tall, armored, in black steel, its face pale as moonlight. Blue light shone from its eyes, though they were closed. Around the block were scattered the bodies of long-dead wizards, frozen mid-spell. Hermione's voice trembled. The ice god? No, Alaric said grimly. Not a god. A vessel. The god sleeps within him. They approached slowly. The air was thick with power, heavy enough to make breathing hard. Hermione could feel it pushing against her magic, testing her strength, tasting the warmth of her soul. Then faintly the figure within the ice moved. Neville stumbled back. It's waking! Hermione's heart thundered. She raised her wand, summoning all the courage she had left. We end it here, before it fully wakes. She began to chant, a spell of sealing, ancient and dangerous, one she'd pieced together from fragments of old magic. Flames swirled around her bright as dawn. The ice cracked, but before she could finish, a voice cut through the chamber, cold and clear. You, bring fire into my house. The air turned to frost. The flames dimmed, suffocated by cold. The figure within the ice opened its eyes. You burn bright, little witch, the voice said, echoing in her mind. But every fire leaves ash. Hermione gasped as visions flooded her. Hogwarts in ruin, friends frozen mid-laughter, the warmth of every hearth extinguished. She stumbled, nearly dropping her wand. Alaric caught her arm. Stay with me. Neville shouted a spell, but it broke against the air like glass. The figure in the ice lifted one hand, and the floor shuddered. Cracks spider-webbed across the walls. Hermione forced herself to focus. We need to bind it. Alaric unsheathed his sword. Then do it, I'll hold it. He stepped forward as the ice exploded outward in a storm of shards. The figure emerged, taller than any man, armor gleaming black-blue. Its eyes burned with the light of frozen stars. Hermione's spells burst from her wand, one after another. Confringo, Incendio, Flagrate. But each flame died upon touching the creature. Alaric met it blade to blade, sparks of frost flying as steel met enchanted ice. Neville joined her side, adding his magic to hers. On three, he shouted. 1, 2, 3. Their spells collided in a blaze of gold and red. Fire erupted around the creature, forcing it back a step. Hermione saw her chance. She drove her wand into the floor and cried out words older than Hogwarts itself. Light poured from her wand, running through the cracks like rivers of flame. The chamber blazed and the creature roared, a sound of mountains breaking, of storms dying. For a moment, Hermione thought they had won. Then the light faltered, the fire began to fade. You cannot kill what death has already claimed, the voice whispered, but you can join me. Cold flooded her veins. She felt the frost creeping up her hands, her arms. The fire in her wand dimmed, and then Alaric was before her, his sword blazing red. He drove it deep into the creature's chest. There was a burst of light, blue and gold together, and the mountain shook. The figure screamed, a sound like shattering worlds, and vanished in a torrent of mist. When the light cleared, only the frozen hall remained. Hermione knelt beside Alaric. He lay still, his blade broken, frost spreading from the wound on his chest. She pressed her wand to him, but the magic only sparked, weakly. No, stay with me, she whispered. His lips moved faintly. The fire must live, even here. His eyes dimmed, and he was still. Neville sank beside her, voice breaking. "Hermione, he's gone." Tears blurred her vision. She looked around. The chamber was cracked, the ice receding, the blue light fading into darkness. But deep within the mountain she still felt the faint pulse, the god not yet dead, merely sleeping again. She wiped her tears, stood, and whispered to the empty air, "Then I'll make sure it never wakes." Outside, the storm had stopped. The stars shone cold and clear above the peaks. Hermione stood at the mountain's edge, the wind tugging at her cloak, and for a moment she imagined she saw Alaric's figure in the starlight, watching, guarding. She turned south, toward the long road home. The war she thought ended had taken one more life, but she carried his fire with her now. And as she began her descent from the crowned peak, a faint warmth glowed in the eastern sky. Dawn had come to the land of ice. They left the mountain behind, but the cold followed. For days, Hermione and Neville trekked south through the white wilderness, where the wind never slept and the horizon seemed forever out of reach. Their magic burned low, their wands dim with exhaustion. The snow hissed softly beneath their boots, whispering secrets neither dared to hear. The memory of Alaric's sacrifice haunted them both. Each night, when they found shelter among the icebound cliffs, Hermione would look toward the stars and imagine his gray eyes reflecting them, watching still, guarding from beyond. She had sealed the temple with every last ounce of her strength. The creature, the merged echo of Voldemort and the ice god, was trapped once more beneath the crowned peak, but sealed was not destroyed. Neville tried to speak of it sometimes, fumbling for comfort. He would have wanted it that way, Hermione. He knew what had to be done. "I know," she would answer, her voice low, steady. "That's why it hurts." They pressed on until the landscape softened. The vast snowfields gave way to black pine forests heavy with frost. The air smelled faintly of earth again, not just ice. Somewhere far to the west, they saw smoke rising, a village, or perhaps a fortress. As they approached, the signs of life became clearer. Footprints in the snow, the faint toll of a bell. It was strange after so many weeks of silence to see movement again. The people of this land were tall, pale-faced, wrapped in furs, their eyes sharp as ravens. They regarded the strangers warily, but not unkindly. An old man with a braided beard met them at the gate. "You come from the north," he said, his voice rough as stone. "Few return from there." Hermione inclined her head. "We were sent by the Ministry of Magic in Britain," she began, then realized how meaningless that sounded in this world. "We came seeking something ancient. It's done now." The man studied her for a long moment. "If it's done, then why does the wind carry your name?" She blinked. "My name?" He nodded. "Hermione. The crows have been whispering it for days. They say the Fire Witch walks among men." Neville looked uneasy. That can't be good. But the villagers offered them shelter. Inside the timber hall, warmth finally touched their faces again. Fire crackled, stew simmered, and for the first time in weeks, Hermione tasted something other than frost. She sat quietly while Neville spoke with their hosts, asking about trade routes and safe paths to the coast. Later, the old man approached her by the hearth. "You brought light to the mountain, didn't you?" he asked. Hermione looked up. "You know of it?" He nodded. "My grandfather told tales of the crowned peak. The first fire that ever touched this land came from beyond the sea, long ago. It burned away the darkness, but it also woke what slept beneath. Fire always wakes something, girl. Remember that. She met his gaze steadily. If it wakes, I'll burn it again. He chuckled softly. Then you truly are what they name you. That night Hermione dreamed once more. She stood before the mountain, now cracked open like a wound. From within came a voice, faint but familiar, Alaric's voice. You cannot fight forever, Hermione. The balance must hold. She turned, seeking him in the dark. You died for this, she cried. I won't let it come undone. The wind answered in his stead. The fire must return to where it began. When she woke, dawn was gray through the shutters. Neville was already awake, packing supplies. We found a trader heading to the coast, he said. He'll take us to a port. From there, maybe we can find our way home. She nodded, but said nothing of the dream. The journey south grew easier with each mile. The snow thinned. Rivers ran free again, their surfaces glinting with weak sunlight. Villages became towns, and soon they reached the sea, a wide expanse of gray water dotted with fishing boats. At the harbor they met their guide, a weathered sailor named Barrick who claimed to know of the lands beyond the sunset. His ship was small but sturdy, built of black oak and bound with runes of protection. Neville frowned at the vessel. Does it actually float? Barrick grinned. It floats better than it flies, lad. Come aboard and I'll show you the world's edge. They set sail at dusk. The sea was cold and restless, waves breaking against the bow with hollow thuds. Hermione stood at the railing, watching the northern light shimmer faintly across the sky. Her heart ached to think of Hogwarts, its towers, its warmth, its laughter. She wondered if she would ever see it again. Neville joined her quietly. You think the Ministry will believe any of this? She smiled faintly. No, but they'll feel it. Magic doesn't stay contained. What we did here will echo one way or another. 3 nights into the voyage, a storm rose without warning. The sea turned black, the sky alive with lightning. Waves towered higher than the masts, and wind screamed like a living thing. Barrick shouted orders, but the storm had no master. The ship pitched and rolled. Water flooded the deck. Hermione gripped the railing, her wand raised, but her spells barely held. Then, through the storm's fury, she saw a glow beneath the water, a pale blue light pulsing like a heartbeat, the same light she had seen within the mountain. Neville shouted over the wind, "What is that?" She stared into the depths, realization dawning like a blade's edge. It followed us. The sea erupted. A column of water rose, and within it a figure took form, no longer bound by ice, but born of it, vast and terrible. The remnants of the ice god had found her. You carry the fire where it does not belong. The voice boomed across the waves. Give it to me, and you may live. Hermione's wand blazed red. Never. Lightning struck the mast, shattering it. The ship lurched violently. Neville clung to the ropes, his face pale. Hermione, do something. She spread her arms, summoning everything left within her. Fire burst from her wand, arching across the sea, meeting the creature's cold light in a storm of sparks. The air hissed and cracked as heat and frost collided. For a heartbeat, the world went white. When the light cleared, the sea lay calm. The creature was gone. The ship drifted, half broken but afloat. Neville coughed seawater and groaned. Are we alive? Hermione leaned against the railing, utterly spent. Yes, she whispered. For now. They limped southward under gray skies. The sea stayed cold, unnaturally still. Hermione felt no triumph, only a growing certainty that the battle was not yet won. For though the storm had passed, a fragment of blue frost clung to her wand, faintly pulsing with light. She stared at it in silence. The mountain's curse had followed her across the waves. The balance, as Alaric's voice had warned, was not yet restored. And somewhere deep within the sea, a shadow stirred again, whispering her name. Morning came gray and wan, the sea calm but heavy as molten lead. Mist coiled low over the deck, ghost-like and still. Hermione stood by the stern, her cloak whipping in the wind. The frost mark on her wand glimmered faintly blue, pulsing in rhythm with the slow roll of the waves. Neville sat slumped near the rail, clutching a tin mug of weak tea. His eyes were hollow with exhaustion. "I dreamed of the mountain again," he said quietly. "Only this time, it wasn't ice I saw, it was stone. Black stone rising from the sea, and voices chanting your name." Hermione's fingers tightened on her wand. "They're calling me back. The balance is broken again. The fire and ice, they're bound now, and I carry the thread between them." Neville swallowed. "Then we've brought it with us. We didn't end the war, we just changed its shape." She didn't answer. The wind had changed. It carried the scent of salt and smoke. Land was near. By noon, the fog lifted to reveal a jagged coastline of gray cliffs and green hills. The land looked nothing like Britain's shores, yet something in the air, familiar magic, warmer and brighter, stirred a memory of home. Beric steered the battered vessel toward a narrow cove. "This is where I leave you," he said. "I'll not go closer to those hills. Folks say the trees there whisper the names of the dead." Neville gave him a tired nod. "Then whisper ours kindly when we're gone." They disembarked and climbed the rocky path toward the cliffs. The sky hung low, clouds dragging over the horizon. From the summit, they saw a stretch of forest rolling southward, and beyond it, faint towers rising in the mist, some castle or fortress lost to time. Hermione drew her cloak tighter. "We'll rest there. Then we find a way back across the Vale." They descended into the forest. The trees were ancient and vast, their trunks furrowed and knotted like the faces of old men. Strange runes were carved into their bark, some glowing faintly as the pair passed. The air hummed with quiet enchantment. Hermione paused, laying a hand against one of the runes. The wood beneath her palm was warm. "There's a barrier here," she murmured. "Magic protecting something deeper in the forest." Neville frowned. Protecting or keeping in? They pressed on until twilight fell. The forest thickened and the runes grew brighter. Then, through the trees, they saw it. A circle of stones covered in moss and frost, glowing faintly gold. In its center stood a single arch of silver metal, humming with soft energy. "The Vale," Hermione breathed. "A bridge between worlds. But it's different." She approached, her wand held steady. The air within the arch shimmered like heat on glass. When she reached out, her fingertips brushed its surface, and the world around her shifted. She saw flashes: Hogwarts' Great Hall, the Ministry Atrium, the ruins of the mountain, the eyes of Alaric as he fell. She withdrew her hand sharply. "It's unstable. The two magics are merging." Neville glanced around uneasily. "Then maybe we should leave it alone." But before she could respond, the ground trembled. The runes on the trees flared red, and the air turned suddenly cold. From the shadows of the forest came a figure cloaked in black. It moved with a slow, measured grace, and when it spoke, its voice was the same that had haunted her dreams. You cannot run from balance, fire bearer. Hermione's wand snapped up. Show yourself. The figure stepped into the light. It was tall, draped in a mantle of shadow that seemed to drink the light around it. The face beneath was pale, the eyes burning blue, the same color as the frost on her wand. Neville staggered back. It's him. The one from the mountain. No, Hermione said softly, dread in her chest. Not him entirely. A fragment. The shadow inclined its head. You bound me when you sealed the mountain. You drew my essence into your wand, into yourself. You carry both fire and ice now, mortal child. The world cannot abide that union. Hermione's pulse pounded in her ears. Then I'll unmake it. I'll destroy both if I must. The shadow's laughter was like cracking stone. Destroy yourself, you mean? You are the bridge now, Hermione Granger. Without you, neither world will stand. Choose, burn, or freeze. Neville raised his wand. She doesn't have to choose anything. He fired a spell, bright green and fierce. The shadow dispersed into mist, then reformed beside him. With a sweep of its arm, it flung him backward. He hit the ground hard, his wand spinning into the grass. Hermione ran to him, but the shadow's voice froze her mid-step. You cannot fight what you have become. The frost mark on her wand flared, spreading up her arm. Pain seared through her. The world spun, and suddenly she was standing not in the forest, but in darkness. The shadow stood before her, its eyes level with hers. You feel it, don't you? It whispered. The power of both worlds inside you. Fire and ice together. I can teach you to wield it. To remake the world as you see fit. She clenched her jaw. That's what Voldemort wanted. To shape the world in his own image. I won't become him. You already are, the shadow said softly. You carry his magic now. His hatred, his hunger. It whispers through your wand every time you cast. Hermione's breath caught. She remembered the flash of blue frost when she fought the storm, the cold thrill that had lanced through her as her power grew. She had told herself it was exhaustion. But what if it wasn't? The shadow extended a hand. Join with me. I am not your enemy. I am balance. Without me, there will be no end to war. Fire will consume everything. For a heartbeat, she hesitated. The power thrummed within her veins, bright and cold, promising peace, an end to struggle, to loss, to grief. Then she saw Alaric again in her mind's eye, his last words echoing. The fire must live, even here. Hermione lifted her wand. Balance isn't peace, she said. It's choice, and I choose to fight. With that, she drove her wand into the earth. Light burst upward, gold and crimson blazing through the trees. The shadow screamed, its form unraveling like smoke in sunlight. The frost on her wand shattered, the blue light vanishing. When the brilliance faded, she stood alone in the ruined clearing. The archway still shimmered faintly, but the runes on the trees had gone dark. The frost mark on her skin was gone, replaced by a faint scar glowing like an ember. Neville stirred, groaning. Hermione, is it over? She helped him to his feet. For now. But the two worlds are bound. What happens here will touch ours, and ours will answer. He looked toward the arch. Can we go home? She nodded slowly. We have to. There's work to do. They stepped through together. The air hummed, and the forest vanished. For a heartbeat, Hermione felt both worlds at once, the cold and the warmth, the silence and the fire, and then she was falling through light. When her feet touched ground again, she smelled grass and rain. She looked up to see the towers of Hogwarts rising through morning mist. The war-scarred castle stood whole again, the lake calm beneath the dawn. Neville laughed weakly. Home? Hermione nodded, though her eyes lingered on the faint shimmer in the air, like frost melting in sunlight. The veil between worlds was thinner now, fragile, uncertain, and deep in her heart she knew this was not an ending. It was a crossing. Hogwarts was quiet beneath the spring dawn. Mist curled over the lake and drifted through the broken courtyard where the last battle had been fought. Grass had grown again where blood once soaked the stones. The castle had healed, but Hermione could feel it, an unease running through the very walls, as if the magic that bound the place remembered what she had done. She and Neville crossed the courtyard in silence. Students had returned, laughter echoing faintly from the distant halls, yet Hermione moved like a shadow between them. To them, she was a hero, returned from some distant mission. They smiled, they waved, but the weight she carried, fire and ice still tangled within her magic, burned quietly behind every smile. Inside, the great hall gleamed with banners once more. Professors spoke softly over breakfast, their faces weary but hopeful. Professor McGonagall, now headmistress, looked up from her tea as Hermione entered. Her eyes widened slightly. "Miss Granger," she said, standing, "you've been gone far longer than the ministry led us to believe." Hermione inclined her head. "We went further than they knew." McGonagall's expression softened with concern. "You look as though you've crossed 10 winters." "Perhaps I have," Hermione murmured. Neville gave a faint grin. "We're both a bit worse for wear, but alive." The headmistress gestured for them to sit. "Tell me everything." The ministry's report spoke only of northern disturbances. No detail, no record. The Aurors who went before you vanished. Hermione sat slowly. The disturbances weren't just remnants of Death Eaters. There was another power, older than anything our world has known. I sealed it beneath a mountain. McGonagall's gaze sharpened. "You sealed it? Alone?" "I had help," Hermione said softly, her eyes shadowed. "But he's gone now." The professor's face gentled. "I'm sorry." Silence stretched for a time. At last McGonagall folded her hands. "You have always carried too much on your shoulders, Miss Granger. But if this threat is ended, then perhaps—" "It isn't ended," Hermione interrupted. "It crossed with us. The barrier between worlds is weak now. I can feel it." McGonagall frowned. "Then the ministry must be told." "They wouldn't believe me," Hermione said. "They didn't believe in Horcruxes until it was nearly too late." Neville nodded grimly. "We'll have to deal with it ourselves then?" "Like old times." Hermione looked toward the windows where sunlight touched the lake. Beneath its calm surface, she saw faint ripples that hadn't been there before, small circles spreading outward. Something stirred beneath. That night she walked the halls alone. The castle's magic whispered around her, soft as breath. When she passed the library, the portraits of ancient wizards turned their heads, murmuring words she couldn't catch. In the astronomy tower she paused and looked to the stars, clear and cold as they had been over the northern peaks. A faint chill crept through the air. Frost formed along the railing. Her breath fogged before her. Then she heard it again, the voice that had haunted her dreams. "Firebearer." She spun, wand ready, but there was only the night. "The mountain sleeps," the whisper continued. "But the sea remembers. The frost that clings to you calls to me. I am not gone. Hermione's heart pounded. You can't exist without the ice, she said aloud. You're bound to that world. The wind answered, carrying words like falling snow. And you brought that world here. She stood motionless as frost spread along the stone beneath her feet. For a heartbeat, she saw the faint reflection of a face in the ice. Her own, but colder, her eyes glowing faint blue. Then it vanished. The next morning she found Neville in the greenhouse, pruning a tangle of enchanted ivy. It's happening again, she said. He didn't need to ask what she meant. Where? In the lake, and in the air around the castle. The veil isn't holding. Neville frowned. What if it's tied to you, to what's left of the frost in your wand? She glanced at the slender length of vine wood and dragon heartstring. The faint scar of blue frost still marked its handle. If it is, she said quietly, then I'll have to find a way to purge it. They spent days in the library, combing through ancient tomes. Most spoke only of sealed magics and dimensional crossings as myth. But in the oldest section, behind a warded case, Hermione found a fragment of parchment. The ink was faded, the script strange, but she could make out one passage. When fire and frost share one vessel, the world trembles. To sunder them, the bearer must pass through the mirror of worlds, where shadow reflects truth. There, what is within will be without. She read it aloud. Neville frowned. The mirror of worlds. You think it's the same as the veil? Not exactly, Hermione said. The veil connects worlds. The mirror divides them. If it exists, it could separate what's inside me, the frost from my own magic. Neville gave a cautious smile. And let's hope it doesn't separate more than that. They brought the discovery to McGonagall. The headmistress listened, silent for a long time, then nodded slowly. There was such an artifact long ago. The mirror of Arist was but a fragment of its reflection. The true mirror was lost after the Founders fell. Do you know where? Hermione asked. McGonagall's eyes darkened. It was said to lie beneath the school itself, deep in the Chamber of Secrets. Salazar Slytherin built his sanctum upon older foundations, magic from before Hogwarts was raised. If the mirror still exists, it would be there. Neville groaned softly. Why is it always beneath something awful? They prepared that night. Hermione's resolve was iron, though her hands trembled as she lit her wand. Together she and Neville descended into the depths, past the walls of serpentine stone, through the dark tunnel that still smelled faintly of damp and decay. The basilisk's skeleton lay where it had fallen years ago, pale and silent. Beyond it, another door had appeared, massive, carved with runes older than Parseltongue. Hermione traced them with her wand. This isn't Slytherin's magic. It's from the other side. The door opened with a sigh. Inside lay a chamber, unlike any they had seen. A round hall filled with mirrors, their surfaces clouded and shifting like water. In the center stood one larger than the rest, framed in silver, its glass clear as starlight. The mirror of worlds, Hermione whispered. Neville stayed close. What now? She looked into the mirror. Her reflection stared back, eyes bright, wand steady, but behind her reflection stood another figure, herself again, cloaked in shadow, her eyes glowing blue. I have to face it, she said. Before Neville could stop her, she stepped forward. The surface rippled, and she vanished. Hermione found herself standing in a world of light and shadow. The air shimmered like glass. Before her stood her double, the frost reflection. "You cannot destroy me," the reflection said. "I am part of you now." "Then I'll burn with you," Hermione replied. They moved as one, spells flaring, flame meeting frost. The light filled the chamber. Walls of glass shattered around them. For a moment, time ceased. Fire and ice twined together in a single blinding brilliance. When the light faded, only one Hermione remained. The frost mark was gone. Her wand shone pure and warm once more. Back in the true chamber, Neville shielded his eyes from the glow. When he looked again, she was there, standing before the mirror, whole. "It's done," she said softly. "The balance is restored." But as they turned to leave, the mirror's surface flickered. Deep within, something vast stirred, a shadow with eyes like stars. The voice whispered faintly through the air, "Balance never lasts." Outside, thunder rolled above Hogwarts, though the sky was clear. Hermione glanced up toward the ceiling, her face unreadable. "Then I'll be ready." And for the first time since the war, she smiled, not with peace, but with purpose. The storm that rolled over Hogwarts did not break for 3 days. Though no rain fell and no lightning split the sky, thunder echoed endlessly through the clouds. The castle's enchantments flickered, wards humming like strained strings. Students whispered in corridors, clutching their books as portraits muttered warnings too low for the living to hear. Hermione Granger, once the brightest witch of her age, now walked the halls not as a student, nor merely as a war hero, but as a keeper of balance between worlds. The mirror of worlds had been sealed once more, but in its depths she had glimpsed something vast and nameless, the shadow of what lay beyond both fire and frost. She slept little. When she closed her eyes, she saw the shimmer of that shadow and heard its promise. Balance never lasts. Neville found her in the library, surrounded by stacks of tomes. "You've been reading for 2 days straight," he said gently. "Even you need rest." "I can't," she murmured, eyes red from sleeplessness. "Whatever I saw in that mirror, it wasn't just a reflection. It was waiting, watching, and it spoke truth. The balance won't hold." Neville sighed and sat beside her. "Then we'll face it together." She looked at him, weary and grateful. "You've said that before, and I'll keep saying it," he replied with a small smile. "You're not fighting this alone, Hermione. Not anymore." Outside, the thunder rumbled again. The windows rattled in their frames, and for an instant the faintest trace of frost crept across the glass. Hermione saw her reflection there, just her own face, pale but human, and exhaled slowly. That evening she went to see Professor McGonagall once more. The headmistress stood by the window of her office, watching the storm's ghostly glow. "It's in the air," she said without turning. "The castle feels it." Hermione nodded. "Something has awakened. It's not the ice god. It's older. Beyond that, the mirror showed me a shadow that feeds on the spaces between worlds." McGonagall's brow furrowed. "Older even than the veil itself?" "Yes," Hermione said quietly, "and it's drawn to magic wherever balance falters." The older witch studied her with concern. "And what will you do?" Hermione hesitated. "If it comes through, I'll stop it, whatever the cost." McGonagall's eyes softened, but her voice held steel. "You sound like Albus Dumbledore when he spoke of destiny. Promise me you won't forget that you're more than the world's shield." Hermione almost smiled. "I'll try." She left the office with the thunder still murmuring above, her cloak swirling behind her. Down in the courtyard, the first real rain began to fall. Icy droplets that hissed against the stone like whispered warnings. That night, sleep finally claimed her. She dreamed she stood upon the edge of the forbidden forest, the trees bending in the wind. A river of silver light ran through the grass, and from its depths, voices rose, not cruel, but ancient, echoing. The bridge weakens. The fire and the frost will break again. The bearer must choose what remains. Hermione reached into the river. Her hand came away glowing with the same gold light she had summoned in the mountain. It pulsed like a heartbeat. She woke with that glow still faintly flickering beneath her skin. When she went to Neville the next morning, he noticed it immediately. "You're glowing. That can't be good." "It's the bridge's magic," she said. "It's part of me now, and I think it's calling me back to the Vale." Neville's face tightened. "You're not thinking of going alone." "I have to. The worlds are bound through me. If I don't seal the breach, it will spread." He shook his head. "You said that last time, and we both nearly died. You're not leaving me behind, Hermione. Not this time." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "All right. Together then." By evening, they stood once more before the archway, deep in the forbidden forest. The same veil that had brought them home. Its silver surface rippled faintly, glowing like moonlit water. The air around it hummed with power. Hermione drew her wand. "If I'm right, the breach lies within the veil itself. We have to pass through, but only halfway. If we cross completely, we might not return." Neville grimaced. "Halfway through a door between worlds? That sounds perfectly safe." She managed a faint smile. "After everything we've seen, this hardly ranks." Together they stepped forward. The air shimmered as they neared the arch. Hermione felt the pull immediately, stronger than before, like a tide drawing her toward the deep. The silver light surrounded them, the world bending, folding, until they stood in a place that was neither here nor there. Darkness stretched on every side. Stars flickered faintly in the distance, and beneath their feet was no ground, only rippling light, as if they stood upon the surface of a vast, endless lake. And then from the void ahead came the whisper, "You cannot bind what was never whole." Hermione raised her wand. "Show yourself." The darkness moved, gathering into form, a great shape of shadow with wings like torn cloth and eyes like dying suns. Its voice was not a sound, but a presence. "Worlds breed worlds. You sealed one wound, and now another bleeds. You cannot stop me, little fire." Neville lifted his wand, defiant despite the tremor in his voice. "She's stopped worse than you." The creature's laughter rolled like thunder. "You cannot comprehend what I am. I am the first magic, the hunger between beginnings. I am the silence that waits when fire dies." Hermione's heart pounded. "Then you'll wait forever." She thrust her wand forward. The gold light surged, radiating through the void. The shadow recoiled, shrieking, but its darkness pressed back, swallowing the light. For every spark she cast, the void devoured two more. Neville shouted something. She could barely hear him. The light faltered, her strength draining. The shadow loomed larger. Then she remembered the words from her dream. The bearer must choose what remains. Choice. That was the key. She turned to Neville, voice trembling. "If I destroy the bridge, the worlds will separate forever. No more crossings, no more portals. But I'll be trapped here, between them." His eyes widened. "No, there has to be another way." "There isn't." She gave a small, fierce smile. "Tell them, tell everyone, that it held, that it was worth it." Before he could speak, she stepped forward into the center of the void. Her wand flared, brighter than the sun, brighter than life itself. Fire and frost spiraled together, gold and blue, weaving into a single beam of light that pierced the darkness. The shadow screamed, the void trembled, the veil shuddered like fabric tearing in two. Neville's shout echoed across the collapsing bridge. "Hermione!" She looked back once, her face calm. "Keep the fire alive." Then the light swallowed her. Neville was thrown backward, landing hard on the forest floor. The archway cracked, the silver surface flashing one final time before going dark. Silence returned. The thunder ceased. Hogwarts woke to clear skies and still air. The frost melted from the windows. In the great hall, the banners hung motionless in the sunlight. But down in the forbidden forest, the arch stood lifeless, its magic gone. Neville knelt before it, tears cutting clean paths through the dust on his face. He whispered the words she had spoken to him once long ago after the war's end. "We fight because we must, and we remember because we can." Above the forest, dawn broke in full, golden, bright, and gentle. The world was quiet again. And far beyond the veil, where shadow and light entwined, a figure walked alone through a field of stars, her wand glowing faintly in the endless dark. Hermione Granger was not gone. She was guarding the bridge, forever between fire and frost. Time no longer passed in the place between worlds. There was no dawn, no dusk, only a steady shimmer of starlight that burned without heat. Here, Hermione Granger walked alone. Her steps made no sound, for the ground beneath her was not earth, but woven magic, silver and shifting like water under moonlight. She had thought death would feel like an ending. Instead, it felt like eternity folded in half, a dream she could not wake from. She had sealed the rift, saved both worlds, and yet she still was. The fire within her burned dimly, a heart that refused to die. For a long while she wandered the in-between, her wand her only companion. The flame at its tip glowed golden, casting faint ripples through the endless dark. Around her, fragments of worlds drifted like shards of glass, echoes of places she had known. The bridge of Hogwarts, the northern mountain, the glimmering halls of the ministry. Each fragment flickered briefly, then dissolved into light. She had become their guardian, the keeper of the crossing, but even guardians grew weary. "Still burning, little fire?" The voice rose out of the void, smooth as ice and soft as breath. Hermione turned, wand raised. From the starlight emerged a figure clad in frost, a woman this time pale as snow, her eyes bright blue. Hermione's heart quickened. "You," she whispered, "the one from the north." The frost woman inclined her head. "I was many things, the voice of the cold, the hand of the sleeper. Now I am what remains when gods fall silent." Hermione's grip tightened on her wand. "If you've come to finish what your master began," the woman smiled faintly. "Peace, fire-bearer, I did not come to fight. You ended the war. Even the cold honors such acts. But you have chained yourself here between what was and what will be." Hermione's breath caught. "If I leave, the worlds will unravel again." "Perhaps," said the frost woman, "or perhaps they have already healed. The bridge stands strong. Your presence may no longer be required. You linger out of guilt, not duty." Hermione shook her head. "You're lying." "Am I?" The woman stepped closer. "Look." She swept her hand across the air, and the stars shifted. The void filled with images, glimpses of the world Hermione had left behind. She saw Hogwarts bathed in sunlight, laughter echoing in its halls. She saw Neville teaching students in greenhouses, overflowing with new life. She saw Harry at the ministry, older now, guiding young Aurors with steady hands. The world had not ended. It had grown. Tears pricked Hermione's eyes. "They're safe." The Frost Woman nodded. "They thrive because of you. The bridge no longer needs guarding. You may rest." But Hermione hesitated. "Rest? I don't even know what that means anymore." The Frost Woman's expression softened. "It means returning to yourself, to the warmth you left behind." Hermione looked down at her wand. The light at its tip flickered. "If I go back, will I still be me? Does it matter?" For a long moment, Hermione was silent. Then she raised her wand and whispered, "Then show me the path." The Frost Woman touched her forehead. A pulse of cold light surged through Hermione's body, mingling with the warmth of her magic. Fire and frost intertwined once more, not as enemies but as balance. The world around her began to spin. The stars stretched into rivers of gold, and she fell. She awoke to wind and sunlight. Grass brushed her cheek, damp with dew. The scent of rain filled her lungs. For a heartbeat she lay still, feeling the solid weight of earth beneath her. Then she sat up sharply, her heart pounding. She was in the Forbidden Forest, near the old archway, but it was gone, nothing left but moss and stone. Birds sang in the branches above. The world was whole again. A voice cried out nearby, "Hermione!" She turned, and there, rushing toward her through the trees, was Neville. Older now, his hair streaked with gray, but his eyes still warm and bright. He stumbled to a halt, staring in disbelief. "Merlin's beard," he whispered. "It is you." Hermione's voice shook. "How long?" 5 years, he said. Everyone thought you were gone." She smiled faintly. "I suppose I was." Neville sank to his knees, laughing and crying all at once. "You did it, didn't you? You saved both worlds." "I think so," she said softly, "though the cost was high." He took her hand, gripping it tightly. "Then let that be enough." They returned to the castle together. Word spread faster than flame. Hermione Granger returned from beyond the veil. Students peered from windows as she passed, whispering her name like a legend. Professors wept openly. Even the portraits bowed as she entered the great hall. Professor McGonagall rose from her seat at the high table, her face pale with wonder. "Miss Granger," she breathed, "we thought you lost to time." "Time can't hold me for long," Hermione said, smiling through tears. The hall erupted in cheers, but later, when the noise had faded and night fell over the castle, she stood alone by the lake. The water reflected the stars like scattered fire. She knelt and touched the surface. For a moment it was warm beneath her fingertips, and she saw, reflected faintly beside her own face, the pale woman of frost, smiling in silence. "Thank you," Hermione whispered. The reflection bowed its head and faded. Behind her, footsteps approached. Neville's voice was soft. "You're staying then?" "For a while," she said. "There's much to rebuild. And there's something else I must do." He smiled. "Of course there is." She looked at the wand in her hand. The frost mark was gone, yet when she whispered a spell, its light shimmered gold and silver both. Fire and ice, one and the same. That night she returned to her old dormitory. The bed was smaller than she remembered, the walls covered in the ghosts of her youth. Books, parchments, a worn scarf in Gryffindor colors. She lay down and let herself breathe. In the quiet before sleep, She felt the faint echo of the in-between, the hum of the bridge, still alive within her. But this time it was not a burden, it was peace. And somewhere far away, in a realm beyond time, the stars flared briefly brighter, as though the void itself bowed in respect to the witch who had walked its path and returned. When dawn came, Hermione Granger rose once more, ready not for war or prophecy, but for life. For the first time in years, she belonged to the world again. Peace in the wizarding world was a strange thing, fragile, soft-edged, like snow that could melt with a single careless step. Hermione Granger knew this more than most. Weeks had passed since her return from the in-between, and though the world welcomed her with awe and celebration, she felt like a ghost drifting through her own life. The castle's corridors had changed. Younger voices filled them now, eager and unscarred. Students whispered her name as she passed, though few dared to speak to her. To them, she was legend, a witch who had crossed the veil and returned. But Hermione didn't feel legendary. She felt hollow, like a flame that burned quietly in a room full of shadows. At night she walked the grounds, wan light flickering over the grass. Sometimes she caught her reflection in the lake, and for a moment she saw two faces there, her own and another, pale and calm, with eyes like frost. Then the ripples would scatter the image, and she would tell herself it was only memory. Yet the world was shifting again. She felt it in the air, in the murmurs of the wind that whispered through the trees. Magic was changing, older currents stirring beneath the surface of life, as if the boundary she had sealed now breathed faintly in its sleep. Neville noticed first. One morning he found her in the library poring through old scrolls. "You're not resting?" he said, crossing his arms. "I'm studying," Hermione replied without looking up. He raised a brow. "You've been studying for days. The students are starting to think you're some kind of ghost haunting the restricted section." She sighed, pushing the parchment aside. "There's a disturbance in the ley lines beneath the castle. I can feel it, like pressure in the air. It's not dark magic exactly, but it's awake?" Neville frowned. "The mirror?" Hermione nodded. "Or what was left of it. The bridge I closed, it's still there, sealed but alive. Every act of magic in this world vibrates through it now." Neville looked uneasy. "You think it could open again?" She hesitated. "Not without help. But even sealed things have a way of cracking given time." Later that week, the first signs appeared. A student in Charms class conjured light, only for it to freeze mid-air into crystal. In the astronomy tower, telescopes fogged with frost under clear skies, and in the dungeons, a pool of water glowed faintly gold. The castle whispered again, the same whispers that had filled the air before the First War. Hermione met with McGonagall in the great hall as thunder gathered beyond the windows. "It's spreading," she said grimly. "Fire and frost, both. I've seen them in the same spell work, opposing elements twisting together." The headmistress's face was grave. "Can it be contained?" "Perhaps," Hermione said, "but containment isn't balance. If these two magics are merging, we may not be able to separate them again." McGonagall's eyes softened. "You've carried enough burdens for one lifetime, my dear. Let others share this one." "I can't," Hermione whispered. "This magic recognizes me. It answers to me. If I don't face it, it will find someone else. And I fear what that might become." Outside, lightning flared white against the storm. The fire torches along the walls flickered blue for an instant, then returned to normal. Hermione saw McGonagall's jaw tighten. "Then do what you must," the old witch said quietly. "But not alone." That night, Hermione stood at the edge of the forbidden forest once more. The air there was colder, heavy with memory. Neville joined her, carrying his wand and a small pouch of herbs. "I told the headmistress we'd be back before sunrise," he said. Hermione smiled faintly. "Optimistic of you." They moved deeper into the forest, guided by faint glimmers of light, the same gold-silver shimmer that had haunted her since her return. The trees grew denser, their roots glowing faintly with veins of frost. When they reached the glade where the veil had once stood, they stopped. It was gone, or so it had seemed. Now the space shimmered faintly, as if reality itself thinned there. The ground pulsed with a heartbeat of magic, soft but insistent. Hermione raised her wand. "It's breathing," she murmured, "like something alive." Neville stepped closer, peering at the light. "You said you sealed it forever." "I did," she said quietly, "but maybe forever is shorter than we thought." The shimmer grew brighter, swelling like a tide. Then the air tore open, a thin slit of silver light. Wind roared through the clearing. Hermione staggered, gripping Neville's arm. From within the slit came whispers, too many voices speaking at once, familiar and strange, calling her name. Neville shouted over the wind, "Close it." Hermione raised her wand, but the spell wouldn't come. The magic inside her trembled, resisting her command. The warmth of fire and the cold of frost surged together, clawing for release. "I can't," she gasped. "It's me. It's answering to me." From the light emerged a shape, a shadow, faint and human-like, yet shifting with every heartbeat. Its voice cut through the storm. "You are not done, Firebearer. The bridge was never meant to close." Hermione's breath caught. "Who are you?" The shadow smiled, its form rippling like smoke. "I am what remains when balance fails, the echo of both worlds. You made me when you sealed the veil." Neville pulled her back. "We have to go, now." But Hermione stood rooted. "If I run, it will follow. It's bound to me." The shadow extended a hand, pale light flickering in its palm. "Come, and I will show you what lies beyond balance." For a heartbeat, she felt the pull, the vastness of what she could be, what she could control. Then Neville's voice cut through the roar. "Hermione, don't." She looked at him, his face pale but steady, and something within her shifted. She remembered Alaric's words, her oath to the Frost Woman, the promise she made to the world she'd saved. "No," she said, lifting her wand. "I choose this world." Her magic flared, blinding gold and blue, fire and frost together. The shadow screamed as the light engulfed it, the slit ceiling shut with a thunderclap. The wind ceased. Silence fell. Neville dropped to one knee, gasping. "Tell me we're done." Hermione swayed, her skin still faintly glowing. "We're never done," she whispered, "but we're safe for now." The glade was still once more, only faint light lingering in the air. The veil was sealed again, and the shadow gone. Yet as they turned to leave, Hermione looked back, and in the faint shimmer, she saw a single spark of silver light, pulsing like a heartbeat. Neville touched her shoulder. "Come on, you've done enough for one night." She nodded slowly. "For one night, yes." They walked back through the forest beneath a sky washed clean by rain, and though the dawn light was warm, Hermione felt a chill run through her, soft as a whisper from another world. Summer ripened across the Scottish hills, and Hogwarts glittered like a jewel upon the lake. Sunlight filled its courtyards. Students laughed beneath the towers, and for a time the world seemed healed. Yet Hermione Granger felt the air stir differently around her, as if some hidden current of magic still followed wherever she walked. The forest no longer whispered but listened. The stones of the castle seemed to breathe, quiet and waiting. She had promised herself she would rest. She attended lessons again, not as a student, but as a guest lecturer, teaching older pupils about the dangers of ancient magic and the necessity of restraint. They adored her, half out of reverence, half out of curiosity. When she spoke of courage, they leaned forward. When she spoke of sacrifice, they fell silent. But even as her words filled the chamber, Hermione sometimes felt as though her voice came from far away, through the thinning veil of another world. Neville noticed first. He found her one evening by the lake, quill poised over parchment but unmoving, her reflection shining silver in the water. "You're thinking about it again?" he said. She didn't deny it. "It's quiet now," she murmured. "Too quiet. Magic isn't meant to be still. The balance I made was perfect, too perfect. Nature resists perfection." Neville frowned. "You think the veil will open again?" "No," she said softly. "Not open. Change." The next week, changes began to appear. The castle's torches burned with white flame instead of gold. The staircases shifted at wrong hours, turning when no one climbed them. Portraits whispered new names. Names that had not existed in any history book. And in the great hall, the enchanted ceiling showed 2 suns for a single hour, then corrected itself as if ashamed. Hermione watched every anomaly with a scholar's curiosity and a survivor's dread. She took notes, measured the magical fluctuations, and traced the disturbances to one point, the place where she and Neville had resealed the veil. Something pulsed there, faint and rhythmic like a heartbeat under the earth. At dusk, she went alone to the forbidden forest. The glade was much as it had been, though the grass grew silver now instead of green. Fireflies hovered above it, their light colder than before. At the center, where the arch had once stood, the air shimmered faintly. Hermione knelt and pressed her palm to the ground. The heartbeat pulsed again, matching her own. "It's alive," she realized. The veil wasn't a door anymore. It was a living part of magic, a child of both worlds, born from fire and frost. "Are you listening?" she whispered to the silence. A voice answered, quiet as falling rain. "Always." Hermione's eyes widened. The light around her rippled, forming the outline of a figure, not shadow, not frost, but something made entirely of light. "I thought I ended you," she said. The figure smiled. "You ended the war, not the world. I am what came after. Balance made flesh." She stood slowly. "Why are you here?" "To return what you gave." The figure extended a hand, and in its palm lay a small orb of gold and blue light, pulsing softly. Hermione recognized it instantly. The union of her 2 magics, the fire and frost, she had carried through every battle. "If you return that to me," she said warily, "what happens?" "The bridge lives again. The balance endures. But it cannot remain in one world. You must choose where it belongs." She hesitated, heart pounding. To restore the bridge might mean the 2 worlds, hers and the northern one, would touch again. Magic could flow freely, bringing new life or new peril. To refuse might mean strangling that balance forever, dooming magic to stagnation. "Why me?" she asked. "Why always me?" The figure's voice was almost kind. "Because you bear both light and consequence. Fire burns, frost endures. But you understand both. You are choice itself. Hermione closed her eyes. Memories flooded her. The war, the friends she'd lost, the faces of Alaric and the Frost Woman, the echo of Voldemort's cold laughter. Every choice she'd made had cost her something. Perhaps this one would too. When she opened her eyes, she reached for the orb. It flared brighter at her touch, warmth spreading up her arm. For a moment she saw visions. Snow-capped mountains, dragons of ice flying over foreign skies, children learning spells beside fires that burned blue, not red. A new world, neither hers nor theirs, but something between. She smiled faintly. Let it live. The figure bowed once and dissolved into light. The orb sank into the earth, and the glade glowed with gold. A gentle wind rose, carrying whispers that sounded like laughter, like relief. Then slowly, the light faded. Hermione stood alone once more, but she felt different, lighter, whole. The endless tension within her magic was gone. The bridge no longer needed guarding. It had become part of the natural order, free and unseen. When she returned to the castle, Neville waited at the gates. "You did something," he said, reading her face. "I finished what I began," she replied simply. That night, for the first time since her return, she slept without dreams. Weeks passed. The strange disturbances ceased. The castle will calm again. Yet across the wizarding world, subtle wonders began to appear. In the highlands, lights of blue flame danced on the moors, harmless and beautiful. In Diagon Alley, the air shimmered like a mirage on certain mornings, showing glimpses of distant snowfields. Wizards and witches spoke of new forms of magic, gentler, purer, born from both warmth and stillness. Hermione watched it all unfold with quiet pride. She no longer felt the burden of power pressing on her heart. Instead, she felt connection, a hum beneath her skin, like a thread tying her to every spell, every life, every moment of wonder. One evening, as the sun set over the lake, she met McGonagall by the shore. The old witch's eyes gleamed with admiration. "You've changed the nature of magic itself," she said softly. Hermione shook her head. "I only reminded it to breathe." They stood together in silence, watching the sky turn gold and crimson. The air was warm, yet when Hermione lifted her hand, she saw a faint curl of frost form on her fingertips before melting into light. "Fire and frost," McGonagall murmured. "Harmony at last." Hermione smiled. Perhaps that's what magic was always meant to be, a balance, not a war. The sun slipped behind the hills, casting long shadows across the water. The reflection of the castle shimmered, twin towers rippling beside one another, one of stone, one of light, before merging into one. When night finally fell, Hermione lingered by the shore. The stars above glowed with unusual brilliance, and in their pattern she thought she saw a familiar face. Alaric's watching, smiling. She whispered to the dark, "Rest now. The world is safe." Then she turned back toward the castle. The halls glowed softly, torches burning gold once more. Students' laughter echoed faintly in the distance, and though her steps were silent, the air around her hummed with quiet joy. The bridge endured, unseen and eternal. The worlds were at peace, not because they were separate, but because they had learned to share the same heartbeat. And for the first time in many years, Hermione Granger felt truly